Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. We are here today to break down the two games we had last night. We're recording on the Monday after the championship games. We're going to start with Chiefs Bills and just start off real hot. So, Scotty, we had the fourth round of Mahomes versus Allen. Josh Allen fumbles the ball 3 times. They had 4 fumbles overall. They lost no fumbles. Mahomes did have the 1 fumble, but the Chiefs still win. How do you think that happened?
First of all, I guess we kind of called this. We said Chiefs Eagles. I don't think anybody called the blowout in the Eagles game, but we'll get to that later. Definitely not to that extent of a blowout. But I think in the end, it's just a team that just seems a little more buttoned up in everywhere, and it's like 1% here, 1% there, but at the end, it makes a bigger difference if you're 1% better in like 3 or 4 different categories. We always forget that the NFL is the coaching league, and I'm not taking a shot at McDermott, but Andy Reid's the best, and it shows. He's the best. Coaching matters in this league. We just always look at rosters, and Philly's got the best roster in the NFL. But I don't want to talk about the Super Bowl yet. But the one thing the Chiefs got, they got the coaching advantage. And against everybody, just everybody, they got the coaching advantage. No Belichick, it's not even close. Andy Reid is now the current best, and is like a big gap between second place. You got best coach, and then you can negotiate. Talk about who the others are.
Sure. Yeah.
Right out of the gate, Buffalo. They almost had 2 interceptions. Like, theoretically, you could only have 1 because if the first one's caught. But it's like Josh Allen's first 2 throws easily could have been picked off. You could see nerves or just not loose. They're not ready. Meanwhile, with the Chiefs, they come out and they look real smooth. First possession, down the field, full possession, touchdown. Right off the bat, you can see the tone. Nervous team that's like locked in, down the field, touchdown. So I think that's the number one reason, and then we'll go over other questions you could shoot back and forth with me, but you asked me number one reason. The Chiefs just looked more ready. This was their thing. They're in their zone. This is their game. Like, playoffs, conference championships are their thing. If everybody has a thing, I don't know. If Gordon Ramsay is Beef Wellington is his number one meal, the Chiefs is conference championship games. That's their thing. They basically don't lose. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is what? Is he like 5-1 in conference championship games or something? He never loses them.
Well, he's got 3 Super Bowl MVPs, potentially a 4th.
Yep.
He's about to potentially beat the Eagles for the 2nd time in 3 years. Yeah. Andy Reid is 26-60 in the playoffs, but with Mahomes, I don't know the breakdown of Mahomes versus, the Eagles with McNabb and crew, but Andy Reid's doing a lot better at the second stint in Kansas City. For me, I think both games in general, I mean, obviously the Eagles have a much bigger blowout, but I think, they always say it's about three phases: offense, defense, special teams. Special teams is easily the most underrated, tier of that. And the Kansas City Chiefs had 148 kick return and punt return yards compared to the Bills' 34. They just took advantage of the field. And even though Mahomes did lose that 1 fumble, and it was so funny because 2 plays before he actually got the fumble, there was the offside call. And, I was texting you, it's been, they haven't had a turnover since they played the Bills and they lost to the Bills. November, it's been 501 plays since they had a turnover. And, I always think there's no jinxing when it comes to this. And I'll say a game's over before it's over. And I thought, the Eagles pretty much had it locked up once Saquon had that 60-yard touchdown, but we'll save some time for that. But when it came to the Chiefs, they took advantage of the little details, as you were talking about maturity. They won because of maturity. And for me, from a Bills perspective, I felt like God was on their way. God was in their, or what was it called? God had like full control over this game. Like God was like, let's go Bills. Like, I really want the Bills to win.
Yeah.
As you were talking about, Josh Allen could have thrown 2 picks and they could have lost 4 fumbles. So when it came to luck, the Bills had all the luck in the world. And, that 1 interception that wasn't really called an interception, I feel like it's going to be the biggest talking point. How do you feel about that play? You remember that play?
The one to Worthy there, where the ball touches the ground, it's an interesting call. Well,
they
like,
both
to
had it.
me, that play, I don't want to go as far as to say nothing, but it means very little to me. because,
Mm-hmm.
and I know like the social media, which is definitely more on the Bills side of in general, that a lot of people are saying it's rigged and stuff like that. Dave Portnoy is like a big voice in the league, like I'm done with football. But I think people forget that it was 3rd and 5, and the Bills had an offside penalty on that. Even if it's interception, they accept the penalty. It's 1st and 10 from the 20-yard line. They were at the 24, sorry, so it'd be at the 19-yard line. You don't think the Chiefs are going to score? I guess it's not guarantee, but it would have been 1st and 10 from the 19. So the difference was 1st and 10 from the 19 compared to being Chiefs 1st and 10 from the 3-yard line. It's actually only a 16-yard swing.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's an interception, that's what's happening. If it's an incomplete, it's also going to be accepting the penalty. So that play means really little to me as far as people wanting to say, this is unfair, this is not cool, blah, blah, blah. And we'll move on to second play because obviously we got to get the refs out of the way, so to say, as far as people's big complaints.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel the Bills are unlucky because they didn't get the break in the refs, like you said, they got super lucky with the fumbles. Fumbles are generally kind of coin flip randomness. Every year there'll be teams that throughout the whole season they just kind of get the breaks. I remember the one year with the Giants when they had that one playoff run with Daniel Jones and they played against the Vikings in the playoffs. They got like every fumble that year, and that's how they made the playoffs with 11 wins. Because it's always one team that gets them all, and one team that maybe loses all the fumbles. Like fumbles are a
Yeah.
lot more luck. The Bulls have 4 fumbles and recovered them all. Never mind getting the one from Mahomes. Like that's incredibly rare. As a matter of fact, before the really controversial call, Josh Allen has a fumble 2 plays before that on a 4th down. And you're kind of playing with fire. Another thing is you're going for 4th down more often. Well, that means what people are forgetting is when the Bills are going for 4th down because their 3rd down efficiency was bad. They went for it on 4th down 6 times because they weren't getting it on 3rd down. They were 5 for 14 on 3rd down. So they had to keep going for a 4th down. Hence, they weren't as good. The Chiefs were 5 for 9 on 3rd down, 1 for 1 on 4th down, being way more efficient. The Chiefs are converting 3rd down at over 60%. The Bills are converting 3rd down at like 35%. So you're playing with fire. You can't keep going for it on 4th down and not expect to eventually get burned, including somehow Josh Allen fumbles just a couple plays beforehand and they recover that one. And just a couple plays before that same drive, Ray Davis fumbles. They had 2 fumbles on the same drive that the bad call happened. So if you want to talk about breaks, the fact that they recovered 2 fumbles on the same drive, but then end up with a turnover on downs, well, my point being, they were kind of destined to lose that possession. The fact that they got
Sure.
no points out of it. So saying it's all the refs for a call that was not like this was not the what was it, the Rams, the Saints about 7, 8 years ago? There was that terrible call. It was like under 2 minutes that basically decided the game. It was a pass interference against the
Pass
Saints.
interference. Yeah.
Yeah, like when it's that late in the game, it's also like, oh man, what can you do about it? This bad call that decided the game? It happened with 13 minutes and 1 second left when the Bills were up 1 point. They played out the rest of the game, and for the rest of the game, here's what the Bills did. They gave up a touchdown to the Chiefs on the following possession. They scored themselves good. They gave up a field goal to the Chiefs, and then they had a turnover on downs. And then they gave up 2 first downs, not one, but 2 for the Chiefs to seal it out. Hence,
Yeah.
they had
Yeah.
many chances to come back. So anybody that says that it's
So
the
many.
refs is just they're biased. They're not paying attention to football. They're wrong.
Yeah, from what I saw, the Chiefs got a good lead. And usually it's like, how do you close the half and how do you open up the second half? And that's what the Bills dominated with. They got that late Matt Collins touchdown. Beautiful throw by Josh Allen. Matt Collins, by the way, like
Mhm.
borderline MVP of the game, if the Bills would have won at least.
Yep.
They got the big plays, but Josh Allen, 6'5", 250, he couldn't get the QB sneaks. You know,
Hmm.
uh, the herd was showing a stat he was 1 for 5 for tush pushes, and like that play in general like pissed me off. Like I think we'll talk about more of a tush push when it comes to the Eagles, I'm
Yep.
sure, especially towards the end where the refs literally like, hey guys, if you do this again, we're just gonna give points to the Eagles because I'm sick of this
That was
bullshit.
fun.
But like but with Josh Allen, you would think 6'5", 250, nobody can tackle that kind of guy.
Mhm.
But the Spagnuolo is like, all right, guys, he likes to go left, he likes to go high, like guard that, like, and he lost all those fumbles because of that. Like he was
Yeah.
playing a little scared, playing a little scattered. Maybe it must be tough to keep on losing to the Chiefs. I mean,
Yeah.
he's 4-0 in the regular season, 0-4 in the playoffs versus Mahomes and Kelsey and boys. But when Travis Kelsey only gets 2 catches for like 16 yards, maybe 18 yards,
Hmm.
and you're not even like able to be in position to win. I mean, look. So Chiefs start off the game really well. Hunt gets a touchdown. They're doing beautiful plays. Then all of a sudden, the Bills close the half out with the Matt Collins. Then they open up the second half, as I mentioned. They're the only team to score in the third quarter with the Cook touchdown. Cook gets his second touchdown. Cook's cooking. Their defense
Oh yeah.
is so-so. I think when it comes to the secondary, the Bills really need to improve that next season, but they just couldn't close it out at the end. Like you mentioned, Bucker, by the way, Bucker's 11 for 11 in the playoffs,
Hmm.
fourth quarter or overtime kicks. This
Yeah.
man is just perfect. And Mahomes is 7 for 7 when trailing. Now, this game wasn't about this, but there was a stat pregame that was like, oh my God, gotta bring this up. He was 7 for 7, Patrick Mahomes,
Hmm.
when down by 7 points or less in the fourth quarter overtime, basically clutch drives. Brady's like 5 for 8 in that. And most quarterbacks, legend quarterbacks like Breeze, are like 40%. Patrick Mahomes 7 for 7 these. So we
Hmm.
always know, like, all right, if they're down, which they were tied, it was 29-29. Mahomes gets the ball, Bucker gets the kick, 35 yards, then all of a sudden they just have to stop him. And Josh Allen couldn't do anything on that last drive. Do you
Yeah.
think the Bills like can even do anything to, go 1 for 4 in the playoffs, versus Mahomes? Like, can they do anything next year to take down the Chiefs?
I mean, obviously anything's possible. That's why we play the games. And
Hmm.
it's hard for me to imagine that Josh Allen's going to go his whole career and never beating Mahomes in the playoffs because they're both young enough. They should match up, maybe two, three more times, depending on seeding in this playoffs. So you have to think that at least one time something happens. But you mentioned, the last possession. I want to go to the last possession because,
Yes, please.
as you said, Cook was cooking. He
Hmm.
doesn't get the ball once in the final possession. The first play of the final possession, and there were 3 minutes and 33 seconds. They had three timeouts and a 2 minute warning. So, like when you have three timeouts and the 2 minute warning, that's a lot of time. You could actually run the ball a
Yeah.
couple times if you want to because you got those breaks. Their first play for the Bills was a run, but it's a run with Ty Johnson. Why? Cook is doing great. He's averaging 6.5 yards a carry. He's not. And then third down and fourth down, the final two plays, including the Hail Mary, that was dropped by Kincaid. Tough catch, but definitely catchable, and nobody's hanging him. I'm not saying he should be hanged. But we all wanted to basically kick Mark Andrews off a bridge, but nobody's saying a word about the fact that Kincaid did drop the pass. Tough catch, but dropped.
All right, all right, all right.
Uh,
Every
uh,
defender in the world, I know he's an offensive tight end, but every
mm,
defender in the world drops that catch. Every
fair,
defender
fair.
drops that catch all the time. Tight ends, outside of like Kelsey, Gronk, elite guys, tight ends aren't exactly the smoothest when it comes to those catches. As you mentioned,
Yeah,
Mark Andrews, a tight end, drops that catch.
yeah,
Mark Andrews is one of the best. Kincaid is like an average guy. You
yeah.
can't blame Kincaid on that. I,
And
I think personally.
and I don't blame Mark Andrews, by the way. I don't. I think he was
Sure.
being overly blamed because we said this last week. The tight ends don't have a big enough impact in the game for me to hang him for that. But that's last week's.
Mm,
But third down and fourth down, final two plays, biggest plays of your season. Cook's not on the field. He wasn't on the
yeah.
field. Not just fourth down, third and five, where they get no yards, incomplete pass. He's not on the field. And even if you say, well, you were throwing is not important, Cook was second in your team in yards, 49 yards, averaging 16 yards a catch. He's not on the field for third or fourth down when he's arguably your best offensive option as far as weapon outside the quarterback. Why is that?
Hmm.
So can somebody explain that to me, or is McDermott just not up to the level of Andy Reid? Like that doesn't make sense. And then you have
Well,
Spags throws in the exotic blitz at the perfect time because there's so much of coaching in this game. You look at the yards; they're almost identical. Passing yards, rushing yards, total team yards. They were like 5 yards a difference. But it's these little moments that the Chiefs are just ready for that perfect play at the perfect time to win the
yeah.
game.
Yep, maturity and taking advantage of those small opportunities. I mean, everybody's talking about the 2 point conversions. When I circle back to those two touchdown
Mm-hmm.
drives at the end of the first half and in the third quarter, boom, they go for a 2 point conversion. They miss both of those. And that's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to figure out where I'm like, Josh Allen obviously upset post game interview. He's like, they were just more prepared. They were just prepared. They were in the right spot. They got big bodies in the right spots. Like they knew exactly where he was going to go. Like Spagnuolo got them
Mm-hmm.
prepared more than anybody. Chris Jones is giving Spagnuolo all the credit today. And when Mahomes, so we were talking about what can the Bills do to win. We thought Mahomes and Kelsey and Andy Reid would win easily. And of course, they do it again.
Mhm.
They're potentially going to go for a three-peat. Never been done in NFL history. Only been done once with baseball with 1990s Yankees, the Kobe Shaq Lakers,
Yep.
and obviously Jordan got it twice.
Yep.
And the Islanders did it in the 80s, and the Canadians did it in the 70s. That's it.
Mhm.
Sports history, three-peats, ever. The history of the world.
Yeah.
Can the Kansas City Chiefs do that? Maybe. I mean, they're probably going to be like a point, 2 point favorites versus the Eagles.
Yeah.
And I'll save that conversation for another podcast because I
Yeah.
want to talk
Yeah.
about these games specifically. But they're just prepared.
Mhm.
Coaching matters. And when Mahomes outperforms Josh Allen, they're not going to win. I know the game was pretty close,
Mhm.
but like Mahomes still got more passing yards, more rushing yards, barely, but still, he
Yep.
outperformed him. He got those two beautiful rushing touchdowns. And I thought Hunt would get a couple, and he got that one early touchdown, and Hunt was fed a little bit.
Mhm.
But one last point I'll make James Cook, 13 carries the whole game. You said he was
Yeah.
averaging 6.5 yards a carry,
Yep.
absolutely dominating. Yet
Yeah. And
the
that
game's
one
pretty close and he
touchdown
doesn't
was
get the
like
ball enough.
legendary, reaching over to the touchdown. They win that game. That's
So
going to be
nice.
replayed forever. Instead, it's going to be a little forgotten. That's an amazing play. And that was a fourth down too. So he don't reach his arm out. There was no touchdown. That game's over already.
I don't know what more the Bills could have done. I mean, you break down the stats, they're pretty even. There wasn't really, obviously, there was the one fumble. And what's the stat about teams that win in the playoffs who have, better turnover differential?
Every game except for last night's game, including the first game yesterday, every game the team with the better turnover ratio won. Now you could say the
Yeah.
Chiefs had the one turnover, but the Bills did have two turnovers on downs. So if you count those, then they had more turnovers.
Yeah. Ooh, great point. Great point. Yeah, those fourth downs, basically those fourth downs, the 2 point conversions, the little plays, and they end up losing by three. Those 2 point conversions
Yeah.
were everything.
I think in the end of the day, if you're a Chiefs fan or a Bills fan, you had the ball down three with 3 minutes and 33 seconds and all your timeouts. At the beginning of the year, if you say you get one possession, 3 minutes and 33 seconds, all your timeouts, and if you score a touchdown, you go to the Super Bowl. You sign up for that. And if Mahomes has the ball, we all think he's going to win. Josh Allen had the ball, and they didn't pull it off. It's that simple. They had 3 minutes, 33 seconds, three timeouts, 2 minute warning. A touchdown sends you to Super Bowl. If you're the best quarterback in the league, you'd rather that than the other way around because at least you control your own destiny. If I'm Mahomes, I'm like,
Hmm.
shit, I only got a field goal on the previous possession. I left room for my team to lose now. Like, if Josh Allen's that guy, and I don't mean to rip on Josh Allen, he played a good game, but I'm just saying, if you're that guy, like 3 minutes and 30 seconds, three timeouts, forget it. We're going to the Super Bowl. I'm walking right down, putting a touchdown in. And I bet if the shoe was on the other foot, Mahomes goes down, scores a touchdown, wins it.
And all they needed was a field goal to tie it up. That's
Oh,
it.
yeah.
They didn't need a touchdown. And Bass, 5 for 5 for 50 plus in the playoffs.
hmm Longest kick
Like,
in Arrowhead history, they said, in the first half there.
yeah, you don't even need that many yards. So why not feed James Cook?
So,
Transitioning a little bit to the Eagles game, you know, you were pissed off that Saquon Barkley didn't get enough carries from a gambling perspective, obviously.
yes.
A little salty there. But obviously they didn't really need that many carries out of him, and the Eagles got, Shipley involved as well as Kenneth Gainwell involved. Um, do you feel the Bills could have won this game if Cook got 25 carries?
Hmm. Uh, somehow I feel like the Chiefs are just going to win no matter what. Call it manifest destiny. I
Sure.
feel like they were just going to do what needed to be done. So it's like they win by three, and they only got a field goal in their last possession, where I just said they left the door open by not scoring a touchdown. But it almost seems like if they needed a touchdown, then it would have been a touchdown because they would have been going for it on four downs. Having that four
Hmm.
downs to go for is an advantage, which the Bills were unable to do even with four downs. Like, so I can't say definitely, but I do think it would have been a better strategy. I do think it would have increased their chances to
Yeah.
win. Like, the old method for Patrick Mahomes, especially back in like when it was a fireworks show, was keep him off the field, keep him off the field, keep him off the field.
Sure.
So how do you do that? You run the ball.
Hmm.
So I think there weren't enough runs. for the Bills, even design runs for Allen. The tush push was not working as well for them. They're not the Eagles. But look what the Chiefs did with Mahomes. Josh Allen in a quarterback option is almost unstoppable. I would have run him into the option, and if you knew that he's going to the left, how about try to right? Because I think Josh Allen, if you do
Sure.
a kind of an option play,
Coaching.
exactly. You think of
Yeah.
Mahomes he has the option quarterback run for the touchdown, and on the final drive, the first down they get, not the one to P Ryan, is a pass to Pachenko. It's like an option. He can run it, or it's a short throw. So it's almost an option, not traditional like college where you pitch it, but you could throw or run, and you got the defender. He got to choose somebody to guard. He stops the quarterback run. You throw Pachenko 9 yards. The drive before that, it's similar, but instead of throwing to the running back, he runs it in the end zone because the defender stays back. That I think is a play the Bills should have been running. Instead of trying to copy the Philly to do a tush push that they're not as good at, say you
Hmm.
have Allen, he's fast, he's big. He can probably run over a small defender like a cornerback. So if you put the defender in a situation where he has to try to guard a receiver slash your option run, I think that's the better play for an athletic
But
quarterback like Josh Allen instead of trying to do a tush push.
I think Spagnuolo just had it covered. Like he
Yeah.
was like, I'm not going to let Josh Allen's legs stop me. He wasn't successful running the ball, which is why I think giving Cook a few more carries would have been a lot better. And at the end of the day, like, sorry for cutting you off before there, but it comes down to coaching. Andy Reid was so much more prepared for it. It's almost like Andy Reid had 2.5 months to prepare for this game
Yep.
because I'm sure he knew it was going to be the Bills or the Ravens. So,
Hmm.
and every little extra off minute he had, he was like, all right, I'm going to prepare a few plays and scheme up for these two teams. Because I know I'm going to need to stop, Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, James Cook. I'm going to need to stop the run game. That was the big thing. Cook did great, but
Hmm.
Josh Allen had 11 carries, only 3.5 yards a carry. Like he was just, they ran 32 times, they threw 34 times. Josh Allen had 12 incompletions. They were much more successful with running, but really just Cook. Matt
Yep.
Collins had a few good plays. But one thing, before we transition fully to the NFC, it comes down to who has the better GM. And when you go back to the draft, the Bills and the Chiefs
Oh.
swap picks. The Chiefs got Xavier Worthy, and
Hmm.
the Bills got Keon Coleman.
Yep.
Xavier Worthy was one of the best players in the game. 6 catches, 85 yards, and a
Yeah.
touchdown. Speed demon. As you mentioned before, you had him on your fantasy team. You're pissed off that
Yep.
he ended the season so much better than he started the season. But hey, that's what rookies do.
And where was Keon Coleman? One catch, 12 yards.
Yeah.
So
At least Amari Cooper got a few catches.
this is true.
Oh man. All right, so let's officially move. Is there anything else you want to say about the AFC Championship game before we move on?
No, I think we covered it all. Just at Spags is I think you got to put him as number one defensive coordinator in the league, and it's an advantage to
Oh,
them that he did poor as a head coach because it stops him from going anywhere and getting another job immediately. So that's
same.
a great advantage when you can keep that consistent. People always talk about offense coordinators leaving, like the Lions are going to have to deal with that. When you could
Yep.
keep your assistant coaches in house, it's such an advantage. Philly's down year in between the two Super Bowls, what happened? They lost both coordinators. They had a down year, now they're back. But when you lose that brain drain, it's tough, and the Chiefs have been able to keep it. I think that just goes to the coaching and how good it is.
Well, the Lions lost everybody. They
And
lost their DC and their OC.
I think they're gonna pull back next year. They're so good they'll make the playoffs for sure, but you feel like they'll have a pullback, almost maybe what like with Eagles had last year. They had the Super Bowl, and then the year in between they lose two coordinators, and the Eagles pull back.
Hmm.
They made the playoffs, but like didn't. And that's why I see the Lions doing kind of something like that. If that makes sense comparison. A
They
pullback,
have to
still
pull back.
playoffs, but a pullback.
I mean, they got great weapons everywhere, and they're going to be way healthier next year. But yeah, it's coaching. Coaching kills. But Vic Fangio, defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles, similar style to
Yeah.
Spagnuolo. You know, um, well, not style, but history. Spagnuolo actually loves to blitz, and Vic
Mhm.
Fangio loves to contain. But hey, we're gonna battle it out in the Super Bowl. Figure out who the best DC wins, and as we say, turnover battle is the victor.
Mhm.
And the Eagles have been trying to force turnovers. That's their biggest push, and they did it
Yes, they did.
yesterday. They dominated. So let's start with those fumbles.
Yeah. I was rooting for Washington. It makes
Mhm.
a better podcast because you're rooting for Philly, but no, but seriously, because it's fun. Anytime I feel like there's a six seed in there, you got that underdog plus added rookie year. It's just if you don't have a dog in the race, then I feel like most of the country was rooting for Washington. It's just
Yep,
natural.
they were.
But I mean, I don't want this to come off as an excuse because you're like 55 points. Oh my God, they must have dominated them. It was
Mm.
really the three fumbles that decided the game completely. Like
Hmm.
you look at when that the fumbles happen, and they're just back-breaking times, all three of them. It's like the first fumble they have. Washington has the ball, down 3-7. They scored on their first possession. You could have said it would be safe to say they'll probably get at least a field goal because most of their drives that they didn't turn the ball over, they mostly got at least field goals out of it. So without that fumble, do they maybe at least 6-7? I think that's a fair to say. You look at the next fumble that happens. Again, they're they're down 20-12 on the next fumble with the ball, and they fumble, which basically gives Philly a touchdown because where they fumble in the red zone. That if they don't fumble there, they probably at least get a field goal. I think they do, considering that when they got the ball back with less time, they were able to get down and get a field goal. So at the minimum, I think they lost 6 points there, and they gave Philly seven. That's like a 13-point turnaround, depending on how you look at it. Now you're opening up the second half, down 27 to 12 to 15 instead of maybe it could easily be 18 to 20. And then that final fumble, it's just like that's when the floodgates open for the scoring for Philly because you could feel the Washington team. I don't want to say give players quit, but you could feel the give up of like it's just not going to happen, boys. Like like it's over. Is that point where we're people. They're people. I know that people think athletes are like robots, like Madden, but you mentally kind of break. You're down 11, but you got the ball. You're at midfield. And you're moving it. Wow, you look like you're going to get a touchdown because you're moving it well. I don't see how you don't get a field goal. You're only 15 yards out of
They
field goal
were doing
range. So
well.
at
Yeah.
minimum, you're going to cut it to a one possession game, maybe 8 point game. Your defense had stopped Philly on their first possession of the second half. So your defense is their first like good possession. Like, okay, defense came out at
Hmm.
halftime. They put in a stop, so they're looking at least somewhat good compared to the first half. They're just getting rolled over. And you're like, okay, hey, we could at least cut this to 8 easily. Well, most in field goal range. Probably get a touchdown here. Maybe it could be a 4 point game, and it feels like anybody's game. That fumble leads to another touchdown, and it was just like you could feel the air get sucked out of the building. From that point, they just roll them on to the point where they got backup running backs running for 60-yard touchdowns all over them. So it really felt like just the fumble game that, particularly as a bad team, you can't do that. Good team, Chiefs, better team, one fumble, they survive, a nail biter. Three fumbles for the worst team? No, can't.
Yeah, I mean, look, they lost a turnover battle by four. It wasn't
Yeah,
just one little fumble like the Chiefs and the Bills. They lost it by four. And yeah, you mentioned so at the end of the game, it was an 11 point lead for the Eagles, right after the Jaden Daniels last touchdown. And
yeah.
then they just score three straight touchdowns and make that blowout. So the game was, look, so you start off the game. I had a lot of faith in the Eagles. I felt like pretty good. I thought the 6 point spread was a little too high because
Mhm.
Dane Daniels, he's been the real deal, and he had a great game. Even when they
Yeah.
were down, he could. I feel like they could have been down like 42 points, and he would have had the same exact like calm demeanor. He was amazing. I don't blame him at all. I think the game boils down to Kenneth Gainwell and Will Shipley kick return, force fumble, special teams making it happen, guys who aren't typically there as tacklers. Will Shipley has 0 tackles in his, career. He's not ready for this, but they were all about toughness, detailed together. That's what Sirianni talks about every single week. The tougher team won in the Chiefs Bills game.
Hmm.
They were big boys. They were knocking the ball out every single time. They didn't get any, but they were still knocking it out. And I know you say fumbles are lucky, but some teams are just coached better to make it happen.
Hmm.
You know, let's cause a fumble. Mike Tomlin's all about it. If only they had good offense like this, maybe the Steelers would do a little bit more. But let's stick with the NFC here. They created those turnovers, and that's not luck. I don't think it's lucky. I think it's they were forcing it. Now, is it lucky to get it or not get it? Sometimes, yeah, absolutely. But when these players are just trying every single time to knock it out, like that's the goal, and that's how you're going to win these games. And the game starts off. Saquon Barkley takes it to the house. First play, 60 yards. And every Eagles fan, like, they don't want to say it because they don't want to jinx it, but they had feeling in their heart. They're like, oh, this game's going to get disgusting. But the Commanders just kept staying alive, staying alive, staying alive. The Eagles were charging down the field, no problem. Hurts ends up getting like 4 touchdowns. Barkley gets 3 touchdowns. This team exploded. I know Barkley only got 15 carries, but Will Shipley had
Yeah.
plenty of carries. And after that 60-yard touchdown, there was a sideline shot of Barkley getting the massage gun to his calf. So
Mm,
he probably was a little sore. And Kenneth Gainwell got a lot of carries before that while he was on the sideline. This team's just deep, and they have skill players everywhere. A.J. Brown finally got involved. They were
mm,
definitely forcing it to him a little bit too much, but I felt like it wasn't that risky. Like they did a good job with that. You know, they got Smith involved, they got Goddard involved, and everybody was blocking for each other too. Like it really is about like the details together. They're the better team, as I mentioned. Like they play as a team. Like the Chiefs play as a team. Like yeah, they
yeah.
have Mahomes, but they're a full team. The Eagles have the same thing. And when it comes to the Super Bowl, I want to save it for a different podcast, but like these are two beautiful teams. The Bills
Yes.
seemed a little frayed, and the Commanders got to this point with much less talent than the Eagles because of that team together
Hmm.
mentality. I think they got as much out of this season as they possibly could. Yes, 55 points, playoff record. You know, the previous playoff record was the Bills versus the Raiders in Buffalo. They had 51, you know, in the 90s, I think it was, when they had the 4 Super Bowl losses in a row. I'm sure it was those years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, possession 30-30, you know, outside those fumbles, pretty even game. Saquon did amazing, sure, but like he wasn't overly fed. Hurts had a pretty solid game. He didn't make any mistakes really. You know, I think he throws it away a little too much, but he's just like, I don't care what I'm doing. I'm not throwing a pick. It was an exciting game. I'm glad the Commanders stayed alive, but honestly, I never really had a doubt.
Yeah. You mentioned Hurts thrown away, and people have been not impressed by him in this playoffs. And I know his yards have been low. He's averaging under 200 a game, but
Yeah,
no turnovers. He's taking care of the ball, and it's always better to throw the ball away a little too much than throw an interception. So,
sure.
like, that's a big thing. Saquon ends with 118, which is shockingly under his projection because it was projected so high. But I mean, he could have easily had 150 or closer to 200. Like, he didn't need him in the second half, basically. Definitely the entire fourth quarter, they didn't need him. Those could have been his yards easily.
Easily.
And, we speak about coaching for the Chiefs. And for you, your Eagles are your team, so it's easy for you to say as a homer. So I'm going to say as a non-Eagle fan that I want to go out and give Nick Sirianni some credit because he's kind of a
Hmm.
little bit of a punching bag for the Eagles. I feel like probably because they have so much talent that you're
They
looking for
almost fired
something.
him, man.
Yeah, like they almost
At
fired
least
him.
the
The
media
discussion in the
almost fired
offseason,
him.
the offseason discussion was the Eagles are making a mistake by not firing him and hiring Bill Belichick. That was like considered mistake of the offseason for that team.
Yeah,
But like you can't play this well on all three levels and not be well coached. Like it's not magic pixie ducks. It has to. You're telling me that he does nothing. People, everybody keeps saying he does nothing. Well, it's not magic. Clearly he's doing something. All the players love him. So even though, yeah, as an outsider, do I think he's a little weird? Yes. Do I see the shaved head and be like, this guy is weird? But clearly the players love him, and he's doing something in there. I don't think it's a coincidence that he had the same, so to say, bad press conference as Dan Campbell, and now you're looking at maybe two of the top five coaches in the NFL, because maybe the media is not sure exactly on coaching, on what the players like. That's two coaches the players loves, and when they had an opening press conferences, people like, well, they're not going to make it through the season. They'll be fired for a season. These people are terrible. Outside of the fact that I think he did the push tush too many times when your quarterback had a little bit of a leg injury, that was my one criticism I'll give
oh
him,
my
is I
God.
think you got an MVP in the background, and the fact that Saquon's not the MVP and he's not going to be is just terrible. That's a different story. But I would have handed off that point. You're up 11. You're on the 1 yard line. No reason to keep pushing Jalen Hurts, especially because Washington's getting penalties. So it ends up being 5 times, even though it's only one on the books, so to say, because 4 penalty back. That was my only coaching criticism. Otherwise, he's doing a beautiful job. You could hate him. You could say he's weird. I definitely think he's a little something, but it's like that. It's like that good kind of crazy. You ever date a girl and you're like, oh, she's crazy, crazy hot. It's that he's like crazy hot for coaching.
It's addicting.
He's the crazy hot of coaching. He's like he's crazy, but he's hot. As far as like he's a hot coach at what he's doing. That's how I would compare him. He's the crazy hot girl of coaching.
It's like the Luke Combs song.
Yeah,
Her crazy's beautiful to me. You
that's
know,
right.
like
He's
it's
crazy. He's
like
beautiful to Philly.
I'll take that crazy because that crazy helps me win. And I mean, look, NFL players got to have a few screws loose to make it work, right? Like these are
Yeah,
guys that like bash their heads into brick walls,
exactly.
and they get concussions weekly, like all the time. Like it's a scary sport. But yeah, let's talk about some offensive line. Why not, right?
Yeah.
So the Philadelphia Eagles going into this season lost Jason Kelsey, the captain of their team,
Hmm.
a media darling right now with his brother
Yeah.
Travis.
Getting a late night show now.
They he recommends this one guy
Hmm.
that they should draft as a center. So rookie center starts the season off a little poorly, as most centers would, especially when you are working with Hertz and the Tush push and this team that relies on the run more than pretty much any team in football. Then this guy is hurt, and Landon Dickerson moves from left guard to center. He starts the game. Jurgen on the bench.
Hmm.
Okay. So Dickerson guts out the first half, clearly injured, clearly having left knee issues. Hurts already has left knee issues, but he's like, I'm not going to wear the brace today. Maybe he feels better. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. They still rushed the tush push like 10, 12, 15 times. They
Hmm.
just kept going time and time again. As we mentioned, the one call where they must have gone it for it 5 times, where the Washington Commanders kept jumping over, and the refs were like, "Hey guys, let's cut it out here. Like,
Yeah.
we may need to ban this play overall." But before we circle back to that, Dickerson can't even play the second half. Jurgen gets back in, and he's like, "All right, we're not going to lose a beat. These are two offensive linemen, big boys with back knee injuries. Still, they got it out." As Sirianni talks about toughness, these are tough MFers. Like
Mm.
these are big boys that just they don't care. And Jalen Hurts doesn't care about the stats. He cares about victories. This is a really humble dude. And I thought this whole like AJ Brown like blasting off on the sidelines like could create a few issues because in the
Yeah.
past, as I've seen with Terrell Owens, with Donovan McNabb, as you know, T.O.'s like McNabb, you're not in good enough shape. It's not about injuries, it's about being in shape. I don't think that's an issue for Jalen Hurts. I don't think that's an issue for Saquon Barkley. These are guys that have squat offs like next to each other. These are guys that definitely are in shape. There's no doubt about it that athletic quarterbacks are dominating the game today.
Yeah.
But with the tush push, can we ban this play? I know the Eagles have like pretty much created this play, but it's not beautiful football. It's ugly, and I'm sick of seeing it.
Hmm. Uh, so you're asking my opinion, and
Yes.
the answer is we should ban it the first game of next year. You can't ban it
Okay.
right now. That would be completely unfair. We're in the middle of the season. Never mind, I don't want to hear all of social media come out and say they're banning the touch push because they want the Chiefs to win. It's rigged. So we can't ban it now.
Oh no.
But
No,
it should be
not
banned
for the Super Bowl. Hell no.
100%. Can I read you something here? All right, tell me if
Please.
this sounds vaguely familiar to you.
Okay.
Official statement from the NFL. This is an official statement. NFL officially outlaws genius trick play that helps Patriots win Super Bowl. Does anybody remember that? All right, this is 2015. The NFL outlaws the Patriots doing a so-called trick play.
Tuck curl?
Nope, that was the ineligible eligible receiver play, where they lined up an ineligible receiver
Okay.
in the slot and they put an eligible receiver close to the line. They announce it right before the play, and then
Sure.
they hike it. Now, since then, they've
Yeah.
changed two parts of that. A, after they announce, you have to announce it at the beginning of the play, 40 seconds. Instead, you were able to
Mm-hmm.
announce it with under 20 seconds. That'll give the defense more
Mm-hmm.
time. B, you can't have an ineligible receiver be in the slot? Because that was the big confusion. Because even though you heard, oh, number 47 is a receiver, your eyes are saying, well, the guy in the slot's the receiver. You count the receivers. You can only have 5 receivers on the field, and you're leaving a lineman open. That's what made it very tricky. Was your brain just couldn't process that the slot receiver is now a lineman, and hence when the lineman
Yeah.
can catch. Point is, Patriots know this rule in the rule book. Bill Belichick is a genius. What's he do? I will give him credit. He saves it till the AFC division game and beats
Hmm.
Baltimore. Big rivalry game. They beat them in a one possession game using that play, arguably. It's not the last play of the game, but it's a big play and they got a touchdown off of. So that's genius, great coaching. Nick Sirianni, great
Sure.
coaching coming up with the tush push. I'm not taking away from your coaching. You're not being punished for being a great coach. But what the
No.
NFL is doing is saying this is an entertainment league. This is a
Yeah.
bad play. We don't want this. They looked at the Patriots play the next season. It was gone. This play is bad for football. It's ugly. This is a sport of entertainment. It's a dog pile. It's rugby. If I want to watch rugby, I'd watch rugby. But I can do that now with the
Sure.
internet and football and whatever, right? Like, it's an
Yeah.
ugly play. You can't see what's happening. You're spotting the ball is kind of a guess half the time. Like, even though, the Eagles probably get 2 yards per carry on it, we guess and give them a yard and a half each time. Probably sometimes it's 2 yards, sometimes it's 1 yard. You're just kind of guessing because you're looking at this pile. It's ugly for the game. I think it's bad for the game. You have cheap copycats like the Bills are trying, and that it ends up being bad for them. I'm not saying we should change it because they failed at it, but I just think it's bad for the league. And now you're looking at you have this ugly play in prime time, arguably the second biggest weekend in football next to the Super Bowl, and it's some people's
Sure.
favorite weekend because you got 2 games, so it's like my favorite weekend. And we have it called 5 times in a row with 4 penalties, Washington jumping over the line, and then you have the refs explaining to you something that I don't think anybody knew, not even the coaches, that, oh, by the way, if we want to, we can just give a touchdown to the other team if you keep having penalties.
I've never seen that
Like,
before. Trying to explain to my girlfriend, she's like, "What the fuck's happening right now?"
exactly. And
I'm like,
you make a good point.
"This is not normal. Don't you worry."
It's the
I'm
conference
like, "But the Eagles
championship.
are about to score."
Okay, you mentioned your girlfriend. It's conference championship.
Yes.
You have way
Sure.
more what you'll call casuals watching the game.
Always.
What
Yep.
if this happens in the Super Bowl? You know how many casual fans are there? How many people are watching just to see Kendrick Lamar do halftime? And they're looking at like, what is this? I've never heard of this rule. This game is stupid. Like, it's bad for the NFL. They should get rid of it. You can do it, and the precedent was set with New England that they did it the next year. You can ban a play by saying it's not good for the NFL. You didn't cheat. We're not doing it
Yeah.
mid-game, mid-season. We're just
No.
saying it's bad for the NFL. We want to take it off.
It's also, we talk about player safety, specifically quarterback player safety.
Yes.
And we have some of the best teams with athletic quarterbacks, whether it's Mahomes, who may not feel athletic, but he has sneaky rushing
Hmm.
yards. And the best prop bet in sports history is taking Mahomes rushing totals, like total carries.
Hmm.
He wins everything with those. By the way, 6.5 for the Super Bowl. He'll probably get 8 or more.
Yeah, I like that.
Um, but these are players that are big, are strong, are lifting weights. Like they're not acting like Tom Brady with plyometrics. Like they're benching, they're squatting, they're big boys. Maybe with like Will Levis in Tennessee, they lift a little too much, but
Yeah.
like these are athletic guys. And I was surprised how much Josh Allen wasn't able to get it, but I feel like the Eagles relied on it too much. One of my big questions was going into this game was like, how often are the Eagles going to, sack, pressure, blitz Jaden because he's really good with his legs? How successful will he be with the legs? And Vic Fangio doesn't sack a lot. And second to that, will they tush push? Will they show that Hurts is actually healthy? Will they show that this offensive line is healthier than it is? And this offensive line is not healthier than it seems. Like these guys are just scrapping this together. Jalen Hurts looked pretty healthy, and it was really, exciting to see him with no knee brace going into the game. But you should not do this play 10 plus times. You should not do this play when you're up 3 scores. Like it's not healthy for this guy. Give it to Saquon. This
Yeah,
guy needs more carries. Like he got 66 carries in these 3 games, but he started off with 25. He should average 25 a game. I
definitely.
know they had other rushing guys. Like they had 36 total carries. He didn't even get half of them with 15. But like they're dominating the offensive line. This game is about player safety now. They, are trying to figure out how to make these quarterbacks like slide, like when are they able to hit them? A defender as we talk about turnovers, you need to apply pressure, you need to apply force
Mhm.
to create turnovers. These quarterbacks need to be treated like any other player, and every other player needs to be treated with care, just like these quarterbacks are. They're all athletes at the end of the day. These quarterbacks are running more than they've ever ran before, and we need to make sure that they're able to get hit real hard. And we're able to make sure the offensive line stays here. There's not an offensive lineman to the right who may, decoy as a slot guy, but then your left tackle can actually go out and get a touchdown. That's Patriots ball. That makes sense. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I should have thought about. But whenever I think of Patriots rules, I always think about the snow game, the Raiders, the tuck rule, where
Yeah.
Woodson's just like, boom, got it out, and they're like, oh, sorry, you actually had it. Like, oh, come on. Anyway,
Totally
I'm
agree with you.
exhausted watching this play. I'm exhausted with it. Obviously, they're not going to be able to ban it, but they're going to do something about it. Like the NBA gets unwatchable at the end of games because of free throws. Hopefully,
Mhm.
they could, transition rules a little bit there. But I don't think anybody enjoys watching this tush push, and nobody
Yeah.
enjoys using it. Jason Kelsey said that's literally why he retired because he's like,
Mhm.
I'm too old for this. It's
Yeah.
really difficult to constantly go under, go under, go under.
And you mentioned NBA, like cross sports, you can change rules for aesthetic appearance of the game for the fans. The
Yeah.
NBA, they came up with a 5 second back down rule because it's not fun to watch somebody ba boom in the post for 10 seconds straight. They came up with illegal defense. They come up with the shot clock. You want to go way back to like the 60s because like, oh,
Yeah.
this is boring as the guy's dribbling for 3 minutes. We have to keep baseball, speaking of shot clocks, they get a pitch clock because people are saying it's too slow, it's too slow. They put a pitch clock and their ratings are up like 10% year over year for the last 2 years with the pitch clock. Great addition to it.
Yeah.
Baseball, they get rid of the illegal the defensive shift. It wasn't illegal, but it was putting the game at an ugly pace of defense. So if a game's looking ugly, you can change the rules more for the fans. You bring up Saquon, you have the best running back in the league behind you, and he's fresh because you gave up the chance for him to get the record that he wanted, that we wanted to watch on the last week to give him that bye to say, okay, we're going to justify giving him the bye. The justification is he's going
Yeah.
to be fresh for the playoffs. He only gets the ball
Yeah.
15 times. Instead, we're doing the push 7 times. And technically, 11 times they pushed Jalen Hurts. His back, his neck was pushed 11 times because it's on the book for 7, but 4 were penalties. That's 11 times. Like, are you
I
kidding me? It's
Nobody wants to watch
nobody wants to watch
25% of
that.
the offense
And
being a 1 yard push.
my worry is that they're going to wait until somebody gets injured. Like Patrick Mahomes on a regular quarterback sneak, his worst injury of his career,
Hmm.
a dislocated kneecap. Are they going to wait until, God forbid, Jalen Hurts does a tush push one day and he's like, ow, I pulled something in my back, I slipped the disc and now I'm out for the season. And then watch how quickly, because once that happens, when a star goes down, then they'll be like, you know
Yeah.
what, maybe we should change the rules here. Just like they add quarterback hits, to the head, anything, the Tom Brady injury with it torn ACL. When you see it, then quickly it's like, oh, you can't dive at people's legs. They're going to wait until like a quarterback gets seriously injured and they're like, holy shit, because maybe it's not Hurts, he's too strong. But what if it's Josh Allen, who's not as good at it? Somebody who's not doing it quite as perfected as the Eagles, and like, oh shit, Josh Allen's out for 10 weeks because he did the
No,
tush push.
Josh Allen's really good at it. He just sucked versus Steve Spagnuolo. That's it. One
Yeah.
game. He's really good at this touch push. They were actually more successful than the Eagles were this year. This is the worst the Eagles have been because Jason Kelsey's not there. I'm just glad that the O line has been able to carry them. And yeah, Saquon's averaging 8 yards a carry. Like this
Hmm.
guy could get a lot more, but
Yeah.
it wasn't needed. Like they had full control over the game. The Jaden Daniels like kept coming
Hmm.
back, coming back, coming back, and he threw 255. But
Yeah.
we were talking about before last week that Allen needed to dominate Mahomes and Jaden Daniels needed to dominate Hurts. Neither happened.
Yeah.
Hurts did a little better. Mahomes did a little better. Actually, Hurts probably did a lot better if you factor in his rushing attempts
Yeah. Yeah.
because he
That's a big
got
part of him.
three rushing touchdowns for a quarterback. That's insane.
Hmm.
This team was so good.
Can we just say for the Bills, the one last thing on the refs? Uh,
Sure.
the worst call of the playoffs was for the Bills, the pass interference for against the Ravens.
They're
That was of all the playoffs, that was the worst call. And I know it was early on the game, but that was the biggest like touchdown call that you could argue was the like, oh, what's wrong with the refs? Are they rigging the game? Were they rigging it for the Bills? Because that was a terrible call. And everybody forgets about that real quickly in a game that came down to the wire. But now we're going to quickly say the refs are rigging the game. Right? So a little bit of karma, if you will, whatever you want to call it. Like, don't tell me about the refs when you got the biggest break of anybody in the playoffs was in your favor of an absolutely terrible offensive pass interference. Should have been, if not the minimum nothing, you got a defensive pass interference that leads to a touchdown. That would have been a really deep field goal, maybe a miss. Best chance, 3 points, probably no points. Instead, you got 7 out of that. So I don't want to hear the refs are against me. Do you know who led the league in roughing the passer calls in your favor as far as your quarterback getting it? Josh Allen.
Eagles, Commanders, anything left needed to be said? We're banning the tush push. We're
I would
done
like
with
to see
that.
Ben tush push.
The Eagles dominated the turnover battle. They dominated special teams. They
Mhm,
dominated the run game. Also, I feel like going back to like how do you teach like your girlfriend about football?
mhm.
Penalties are always the problem. Flags,
They are
offsides,
confusing.
encroachment, always the problem. When there's 3 encroachments in a row in the end zone, it's like this isn't watchable. That's why we got to ban the tush push. The penalties were pretty even in Chiefs Bills, and I think rightfully
Mhm,
so. When it came to the Commanders, they were just stupid. They were constantly making dumb penalties. Like
yeah,
they finished with nine penalties for 47 yards, which isn't that bad. 47 yards is it could have been way worse. How do
yeah.
you feel about that? Do you feel like that's a coaching thing? Is that Dan Quinn? Is that just these guys have too much pressure?
I think pressure definitely comes in. I think when you're the underdog, you're gonna kind of you have to like the trick punt. That was a good play, and I was for it because like when you're the underdog, you got to try different things. You got to be almost overly aggressive because you know you're starting at a disadvantage. You're just not as good, so you got to try things. So I'm okay with that. And when they knew they couldn't stop the tush push, I was okay with him jumping over the line and trying something different. Like if I could jump the count, and nobody seemed to
Hmm.
obviously know that. I don't even think Philly knew that they could say, okay, if you do that again, it's unnecessary roughness, and you do it again, it's going to be a touchdown. So I understand they're like, hey, you know what? What if we just keep causing a penalty because we're only losing 2 inches? You're so close to the goal line, so we're just going to keep jumping it to
Sure,
try to time it. So
sure.
I like them trying different things, and it does lead to penalties. You're the younger team, maybe a little immaturity. You're just not as good overall. You got to try different stuff. I'll tell you my message of the game. Number one takeaway. Well, I'm a diehard Giants fan. It's going to be a long decade. That's my method. It's like this division. This is going to be a long decade. And I'll throw in the Cowboys there. As much as I hate
Yeah.
them, I have a pity for them. As far as we're both in shit, I'm looking at it like, wow, this is Washington with a rookie and this Philly roster. That it's like every time you think they're the best roster, they get another good player somehow. It's like, oh, they just get an A+ on the draft. They draft Jalen Carter, who looks like already the second best defensive end behind Chris Jones in the league, and he's second year pro. So I'm looking at Philly's roster, I'm looking at Jaden Daniels, and I'm saying, well, I'm looking at a decade of being in the basement of the NFC East.
It's really tough. I mean, 2 NFC East teams in the championship game. And yeah, the Commanders went from bottom of the barrel to a top tier team. And they don't look like, they're really going to miss too many pieces next year. They got a lot of young players. Terry McLaurin's probably been on the team longer than anybody, and that's like 7 years or
Mm.
so. I mean, it's quarterback at the end of the day.
Bright
This
future.
team, yeah, absolutely. Very bright future. And the Eagles, I mean, I don't want to be too biased with this, but they're just a good organization. They know how to draft. Howie Roseman knows what he's doing. They start with the O line, they start with the D line, and then they move out.
Yeah.
And they're like, let's get big boys. And I was listening to Bill Simmons' podcast, and one of his best friends is Joe House,
Hmm.
big Washington Commanders fan. And look, it's been 33 years since they were in the championship. They've been pretty hot, but they were just going on and on about how the Commanders were going to win, Commanders were
Hmm.
going to win, and they're like they're going to make Jalen Carter tired. I'm like, yeah, this guy's fat, sure, but like he plays more snaps than anybody
Yeah,
outside of
he
like
did.
what TJ Watt does. Like he's constantly in there, and they got a bunch of big boys that could just cycle through. Like
Oh yeah.
they're deep. They're not going to lose because somebody's tired. They're just going to rotate another guy in. I think Jaden Daniels, props to you. You played amazing. You're definitely not the reason you lost. The Eckler fumble was pretty tough. As you broke down before, these fumbles were at crucial times. And when you win 21-0 in the fourth, the final score looks like a blowout. But I think if these teams play 10 times, the Commanders got a couple wins there. They got a couple chances.
Yeah.
They're a good team for sure. I just think this Eagles team's built well, and I should have had a lot more faith in them at the beginning of the season, but honestly, this is like the most comfortable I've ever felt about an Eagles team. I've never felt like they really were in control most of the season. Like this is a team I never really had a doubt in. I constantly picked against the Commanders. I thought Tampa would beat them. I thought Detroit
Hmm.
would beat them.
I
I
did
thought
too.
Philly would beat them. But
Yeah.
with this Eagles team, I was like, nah, I think they're going to do pretty well.
You mentioned about them being built well, and I would agree. They got the best GM in the NFL, and you can make a strong argument that the Chiefs got the second best, or he's in the discussion. So you're looking at the Super Bowl, and you're saying that how important, we spoke about coaching players. What about just organization, owner slash GM, if you want to count that as two positions, one position, kind of like when you have a team that knows what they're doing, that builds rosters well, you're gonna be in the discussion every year. Like that's something that gets often overlooked is just Philly's ability to build a roster, inside out, big guys first, physical, tough pieces that match together well. Do you match them up?
Hmm.
Like it's not something that we talk about is GMs, and the fact that people know Howie Roseman is probably, I guess, that's an attest to him because not many people could name more than maybe two or three GMs. Maybe they know their own GM. Uh, I know the Giants definitely have a bad one, so there goes Saquon. That's a great one. But
I mean, talk about dysfunctional franchises. The Raiders hire Pete Carroll,
mhm,
and they thought they would get Ben Johnson. And they thought, in order to get Ben Johnson, Tom Brady, who's running this franchise pretty much, is like, all right, we need to get rid of our GM because Ben Johnson's going to want to bring in all of his own guys.
mhm,
So before you even get the guy, you dismantle what you already have just to free up an opportunity for one guy who you don't even know is going to be a good head coach. You just
yeah,
know can design a few beautiful plays, and they just scrap everything. But the Eagles are like, we're not going to fire anybody too early. Same thing with the Steelers. Like, that's a great organization. Like, I know they're not really successful in the playoffs lately, but like, they're at least consistently in it. And there's not a lot of them out there. There's not a lot of good GMs out there. There's not a lot of good head coaches out there. That's why we're going to get 7, 8 new guys every single year.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's kind of a dirty secret in the NFL is that there's really only about half the league is playing the same game. It's like half the league is well built, well owned GMs, and the other half of the
Hmm.
league seems like they're just always reacting, running around the chicken with head cut off, reacting instead of building it themselves. Like, oh, this team in my division did this, so I should do this. They're trying to chase instead of actually build a culture themselves. There's at least 10, 12 teams in the league that you're like, oh, you're just poorly built. Because of the parity, you can make a run, but you're like, no, you're a poor built team. What are you doing? Look at the Bengals. I love Joe Burrow. They just got to the Super Bowl only a couple years ago. That's
Yeah.
terribly run. They can't figure out what's going on with Chase's contract, Higgins' contract. They don't know what's going on. Like that's just an example. If you can't tell me if Harry Roseman wasn't there, they would have Higgins and Chase locked up, and they'd probably have a better offensive line on top of that.
Yeah, and you would think the 49ers are well built too, and they got John
Hmm.
Lynch like
Yeah,
they're running the helm. And look, Shanahan's a beautiful coach too, but they couldn't even figure out Brandon Ayuk's contract before the
exactly.
season.
And
They're
what's that lead
like,
to? Injury? Is it because he wasn't at training camp? Maybe he doesn't get injured like that. So
"Mhm,
the whole season, the tone is set.
absolutely. All right, Scotty, we're going to come back next week, or maybe in a couple of days, to talk about the Super Bowl matchup. Is there anything else you wanted to touch base on when it comes to the AFC NFC Championship games?
Uh, we mentioned rule change. Can we talk about voting change for MVP? Because in a
Okay,
week or
regular
two,
season MVP.
yeah, regular season. In a week or two,
Okay,
according to Vegas, Lamar Jackson is going to get the trophy sitting from his couch for the second time in 2 years.
sure.
Maybe Josh Allen gets it from his couch. And it took you literally the first play of the game to say, oh, there's the MVP. First play of the first game. It's like 3:01. Football starts at 3 o'clock, 3:01. Well, sorry, actually, they had the ball second, so I can't say that. But first play that they had the ball, like, oh, yeah, the MVP plays for that team. That's
Yeah,
shocking.
yeah,
Is it shocking to me that the MVP plays for probably the best? I'd say best team if you want to say roster for sure. I think the Chiefs are maybe a
sure.
better team, but like, huh,
Hmm.
yeah. I think maybe we might have messed up this vote. I understand you're not supposed to count playoffs, but maybe just in the back of your mind, keep it in mind that, yeah, the last 2 years, we're watching the Bills go home, the Ravens go home, and Saquon is literally running to the Super Bowl and doesn't and is not going to get a trophy for it.
Here's a guy who sacrifices statistics for winning plays. He had plenty of opportunities to get way more yards. He could have easily broken
Mm,
out, I don't know about easily, but he would have been really close to breaking Dickerson's record for most rushing yards in the season. Plus, with Hurts getting all those rushing touchdowns, he's
yeah.
sacrificing those. But I know last week you were like, Jaden Daniels is probably the biggest offseason addition of any team. And I was asking if it was Derrick Henry, Saquon, or other. Do you feel like Saquon, who may not get the MVP, do you think he's still or could be the best offseason pickup?
Well, it's kind of like the award because it's not evenly weighted. The quarterback is weighted so much more. So it's like he is,
Yeah,
but he ends
okay,
up not
fair.
being the same way. The MVP almost always goes to quarterback because it's just the quarterback is so much more important. But I'll put it this
Yeah.
way: Saquon is the number one player at his position. How many other
Hmm.
teams picked up a free agent that is number one? So did any other team pick up the number one free agent at wide receiver? No, that's probably Jamar Chase or Jefferson. So nobody like they
Hmm.
stayed with their team. So you know what I'm saying? Did anybody pick up Patrick Mahomes in free agency? Did any
Hmm.
pick up Pat Surtain in free agency? Like if you look at the number one player at that position to pick up in the free agent, the number one, if it was Madden, the number one player at that position is unheard of. Like you would have to be a really stupid team to get rid of that player, right?
Yeah.
Uh, why don't you make me a deal?
A
If
few players,
you make me a
a
deal,
few old men in that
okay, you make me a deal.
that meeting room were really upset about that,
All right, you make me a
and
deal.
it
If
still got to NFL Films.
you make me a deal. If Philly wins the Super Bowl, they got to send one ring
Okay,
over to the Giants GM there, Joe. Joe, I forget his last
just
name.
one.
You send a ring over to him if they win a Super Bowl. He deserves one, I think. You know,
That'd be tough. And you send them to
because
Philadelphia too, of
because
all teams.
to quote him, we can't have a $40 million quarterback handing off to a $12 million running back. That doesn't work. Now, if I remember correctly, I think Jalen Hurts makes over $40 million, and he hands off to a $12 million workout running back. Seems to work
Yeah,
pretty well.
yeah. And the whole reason the Ravens were even alive
Yeah.
is Lamar and Derrick Henry. Yeah, running backs matter. Story of 2024 season. Do you think the NFL could do like a baseball thing where in baseball there are Cy Young winners and then there are MVP winners? So basically, an offensive player will get it compared to a pitcher getting their own award. Do you think we could do like best quarterback award and then best, you know, everybody else award? Because
Uh,
at the end of the day, yeah, Saquon deserves a lot more credit than he's getting right now, at least
I
when it comes to those like pro football reference statistics.
I would like to see that. I know some people push back and say, well,
Yeah.
they already do that with the offensive player of the year. Well, even if you want to say it, then make it official because you can still
Hmm.
be offensive player of the year and not be a running back. I think the last time it happened is when was it Adrian Peterson and Peyton Manning? Did Adrian Peterson get the MVP that year and Peyton Manning got offensive player of the year or something like that? I'm not sure, but like you could theoretically
Sounds about right.
just make it official. Say here's the quarterback award, so we don't have to pretend, and we have the MVP finalist, and Saquon will be a finalist when we have like the five people or your ballot. You can put five names. Let's just make it official. Let's call it a quarterback award. We could have an MVP award, and I don't see why we can't have offensive player also. So we could have three because let's say we had three. You know what we could have done, and I'll just pretend that I may have a vote and we had three. Best quarterback award. Oh, well, I'm going to go with maybe, let's say Lamar Jackson, you want to go because his statistics. Now I can focus more on his statistics and not worry about his team's record. MVP, Saquon, and you know what? Offensive player of the year? Because because I've given MVP to Saquon, I'm going to throw in Jamar Chase. He has a triple crown and he's not even up for anything. So maybe he could have been offensive player of the
Right?
year if you had a different award for quarterback.
He's like the main guy to stop. Our running backs are rookie. Higgins is amazing, but like every single defensive coordinator is like, stop one, stop one, stop
Yeah,
one. Jamar Chase is the main
you
guy
get
to stop.
triple crown. It's only like the sixth time or something in NFL history. It's not spoken about because he missed the playoffs, sadly. But like that could have been Offensive Player of the
Yeah,
Year if
that was
Saquon
tough.
gets MVP. But now what happens is by having the MVP quarterback only, you actually denied any other player, and I'm using Chase's example, for even being up for Offensive Player of the Year because you have to give it to Saquon now because you took him out of the MVP race.
Mm, true. I mean, when you talk about Super Bowl MVPs, the last time a running back won was Terrell Davis, and a couple years before that was Emmitt Smith.
Hmm.
Terrell Davis won Super Bowl 32. We're on Super Bowl 59, so it was a little while ago. And
Yeah.
it took him he had 30 carries for 157 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. That could easily be Saquon's statistics.
Yeah.
His Super Bowl is actually 114 yards,
Hmm.
rushing yards when it comes to his prop bets. But we'll save that. We'll save that.
Yeah, save
All
that.
right. So, thank you, Nerdie Sports audience. Thank you for coming back for another episode of Nerdie Sports. We are going to come back and talk about the Super Bowl next time. And as always, Scotty,
Keep it dirty.
keep it nerdy.
Peace.